Welcome to this Grief Journeys podcast. My name is Ione Lewis. I'm the founder and director of Grief Journeys, and I'm here today with Eliza-Beth Brennan. So we're going to start by acknowledging country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. We would like to show our respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, past, present and emerging. So I'm meeting with Eliza-Beth Brennan today to record this podcast. Grief Journeys is a not-for-profit company. We provide free grief counselling and therapy and advocacy for suicide bereaved people. We auspice an online group with over 400 members that meets online once a month. And we provide professional development for practitioners in the field of suicide bereavement. We undertook a survey with grief members at the end of 2020 to guide our activities this year, and our members said that they would like more information and resources on spiritual and meaning-making activities. I'd like to introduce Eliza-Beth Brennan. She's a nature-based guide, holistic counsellor and psychotherapist and shamanic healer based in Victoria. She works with people to uncover who they are and heal themselves at a soul level. So the aim of our discussion today is for you to go away with ways to honour your grief and to create sacred spaces in your own life, or perhaps to think about how to work on that level with your clients who are suicide bereaved. So, Eliza-Beth, how do you use rituals in your practice, and how do rituals become embodied for the person participating in them?
Hi, Oni. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Ritual and shamanic practice, they go hand in hand. We're really working deeply in a connected way with the natural world and the unseen world. And ritual really is a way of marking transitions and providing meaningful, soulful, embodied ways to support our rites of passage and movement from one stage to another. And that can be a micro movement from small stages or really big transitions for phases in our lives. As shamanic practitioners, we can be ceremonial leaders, if you like, really holding space for another person to experience a ritual. And to do that, we set up a sacred space for the work to take place in. And it becomes quite automatic. So, even today in preparing for this conversation, which I consider to be sacred work in itself, I prepared the room by lighting a candle. I spent some time outside honouring the Earth Mother and Sky Father and my ancestors and spirit guides. I then cleared the space with a spray and really welcomed in my spirit guides into this space for today and for this conversation. And this just is part of living really as a shamanic practitioner, and we really try to introduce people in small ways to small things they can do to bring a more intentioned, mindful, spiritual way of working and living. So one of the ways that we do that is to create a sacred space, and that can be in a room, or for me, I'll use a medicine wheel or a dreaming wheel to conduct the rituals and the healings within. And really it's a container for our work, and it's a threshold for us to really move in and then move back out of that space. And that can be quite important when we're doing this work, because we can transition into altered states of consciousness, different ways of being. So we move into that state, and then we have a threshold to then move back out as well. And in setting up that space, it could involve using voice through song or prayers, symbolically representing what's important for us. So for me, it's the 4 directions, it's the totem animals associated with them, and it's the elements. And so I'll have the elements represented in some way: air, water, fire, and earth. But when we're doing it at home with ourselves, you know, what's symbolically important for us? It could be a photo of a loved one. It could be a prayer. It could be a song. It could be like simply lighting a candle. But it's the way in which we do these things. It's the intention that we bring. It's the mindfulness. And in that practice, we're really entering into a more sacred relationship, both with what we're trying to do and then with an unseen world, the spiritual world.
Okay, thank you for that description, and also for how you prepared the space today to have this conversation. That's really beautiful to understand how you clear a space and hold a space. And I've just returned from Adelaide, where I do an annual ritual to remember my son who died by suicide. And I remember at the beginning of my grief journey how hard you have to reach to find the ritual that is right or is going to help. And there isn't a lot of containers for that in our society, you know. And I think because suicide was taboo and there are a lot of practices about excluding the person who died by suicide even from a cemetery, then, you know, it's really important to create and hold a space and acknowledge the person who's died and the person who's grieving. So thank you for sharing that. I'm really interested to know, based on your experience, what do you think would come up for a bereaved person working in this space with you? What kind of feelings or experiences?
You know, as we know, it's so individual for the person, and so it's really about listening to their story and listening to where they're at and to what they're processing at any given time. So for some people, it could be forgiveness that's needed there, or there's anger that's showing up. There might be a little bit of denial or disbelief in the loss. And then, of course, there's the mourning that takes place, which can take place over, you know, periods of months and years. Yeah. And how do we allow for that, but still live in the world as we need to live? And then, of course, there's the process of shifting out of our mourning phase, and perhaps cultivating a different relationship with our loved one. For us, shamanically, we do believe that there's an enduring part of a person that continues on. And this is that spiritual element that comes into play. And so how do we have a relationship with that, the spirit of the person? And then how do we also shift our identity in the world and the way that we are without them in our lives? So they're all so many different facets of this journey that is grief and that is life that we actually need to address in different ways.
Yeah, great. So how would you use rituals in your practice, and how do rituals become embodied for the person?
So one thing about ritual is that it's individual for the person and for the circumstance, and I think that it's the unique part of ritual that is what brings in the soul of the ritual. And by that I mean, yes, there are a number of rote rituals that you could do, but it's actually about sensing in with the person as to what's going to be most meaningful for them at a particular time. And we can do this for ourselves as well. What's most meaningful for me in this moment? that I can bring intention to. And the embodied part of it is that it's the physical doing of these rituals that involves the whole of ourselves. So ritual can involve sound, songs, saying prayers out loud, using our voices, hearing what that sounds like. It involves the act of lighting a candle or bringing in a photo or burying an aspect of our loved one. It can involve creativity in that sometimes I will ask somebody to create an effigy, so a symbolic representation of their loved one or an aspect of it that we really want to bring out and look at, and then in some way bury or leave on the earth. We can also, of course, bring in scents through using smudges and using essential oils. Again, so this is the embodied way. We're using all of our senses. We're bringing all of ourselves. And when we do that, and we do that with mindfulness, and we do that with a sacred intent, then we're connecting quite deeply with all parts of ourselves. We're connecting very soulfully. And that can be a very powerful way of working through grief.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And what do you think would be the outcome for that person? What do you notice when you use a ritual? What happens for the person, or how are they transformed? Because I imagine it is quite transformative because it's so deep and connected.
It is transformative, and because we're really working with the whole of a person, often what happens is at the end of a ritual, there's this sense of feeling different. And it can be hard to pinpoint exactly what that is. Yep. And that's perfectly natural and normal because things are shifting, and it's not just in our heads and it's not just in our bodies. It is in our hearts, it is in our soul, it's in our emotional body. And they can be a little bit harder to grasp in language and in our minds.
Yeah.
Shifts are occurring. And one of the powerful things for people sometimes is having a witness. So having a witness there that can witness their grief, that can witness their pain, having that ceremonial leader that can hold that space and be that container. But also too, there are times when we do go deeply into our grief and into our emotional selves. And sometimes we need to know that there is that person that holds that cord for us to bring us back out, to welcome us back into the world, to help us ground, so that we can then continue with our lives as we need to.
And that sounds important for safety too, to have that witness and person to guide us out back into the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are rituals to use in the sacred space where someone has died? So I know that sometimes I've gone with a person to somewhere in the bush where her son has died. Sometimes people have talked to me about, the difficulty of being at home when the person died at home. And so what rituals could be used in that space to help the people left behind to keep on going and live their lives and return home feeling safe?
Yeah, I think that there are probably a number of different rituals depending on what we're looking for at a given time. So, for example, in a space in the home, there might be a period of time where that room or that space needs to be honoured for what it is, for the memory of that person, and we can set up an altar there and consciously go into that space, feel into that grief, and move back out of that room. So again, you know, we're going in and we're coming back out.
Yeah.
But then there's a time where we might want to change or shift that relationship that we've got with that space, and even with our mourning of that person. And so we would perform a cleansing of the space, a shifting of that energy. Yeah. And a really wonderful way to do that is to literally wash the walls. So, and I would really encourage that the individual does this. So of course we can outsource this work, yeah. But that's really not what we're talking about here when we're doing the ritual. It is embodied. It is about us doing the work. And so preparing the bucket of water, setting the intention that you're clearing the space, mindfully really dipping the cloth in, the sponge in, thinking about what you're doing. You are clearing the energy, you are clearing the space, you are making way for the new. You're ready for that transition. And you do that slowly and mindfully, and you take the time that's needed to wash the walls, to wash the ceiling, and then think about what you want to bring into that space. Some people might want to also smudge the room, so white sage, and there are smudge sticks that you can use for that to clear that space, and then bring in a fresh element of some flowers or a plant or some essential oils, and then think about the purpose of that room going forward. And really, again, you know, with intention, set up that purpose for that space.
Right, that sounds very freeing and liberating when the person is ready. And I guess this next question is a good segue from that, because sometimes people say they don't want to let go of their grief because it feels like letting go of the person that they love. I understand grieving is a long-term process, so we don't ever want somebody to feel they have to let go. But what's your view of that dilemma, like holding on and letting go?
Yeah, I think that as we've said before, one of the powerful things about ritual and about ceremony is that there is this deliberate entering in and coming back out. So sometimes I feel with our emotions, be it mourning or something else, they can sit with us just endlessly. And we're kind of half living them, half not. They're in forever presence. So there could be a time where we choose consciously, I am going to go into this mourning space, and I'm going to go there quite deliberately. For me, in the passing of my father, there was particular music that I would play, and I would play that knowing that it would trigger a grief response, and I would go there wholeheartedly. But then I would know there was a time for that music to stop, and for me to shift out of that, and to perhaps have a shower and to get dressed and then to go on with my day.
Yeah.
So there's times for that. And then there is times for us to say, actually, perhaps I'm shifting the relationship that I have with this mourning process. So by that I mean trusting that there is the capacity to have a spiritual bond with the person or the animal. I'll honour animals here as well. They're an important part of our lives. Right. So with the spirit of the animal or the person, but also knowing that we can live our lives as we need to as well. And so how do we connect then with the spirit of that? And a couple of the ways is that there might be times when you'll sit somewhere peacefully and you'll dialogue, speak out loud, or there'll be times when I would encourage people to connect with the person through love. So through their love of that person, connecting with their heart space and feel that love. And there's a time for that, because often, if you do it too early, you're connecting with the pain and the grief. And that there is also this space to really experience that love of that person, and a sense of presence there. And then there's also a time for finding a way to mark the coming out of the mourning phase. And so then we're really working on what's the identity of that person, and how are we going to actually breathe more life into the relationships that we have in the world now, and breathe more life into the way we want to be living. And sometimes, that can be marked by a community ceremony, and bringing people in and witnessing that transition. Some people might choose to go on a deliberate holiday with friends, to mark that they're spending time now with their friendships and they're cultivating that a little bit more. And we can do it in other ways with our clothing, and we see this in cultures where a mourning phase, there might be a particular clothing. We might wear black for a period of time, and then at some point we transition out of that.
Yeah. Great. Okay. What a beautiful journey that we've been on through your expertise and experience in this aspect of grieving, which is ritual and kind of celebrating the person as well, through honouring their life. Yeah, so that's been really beautiful. Just to finish up, can you tell me about your experience of women's initiation and what that may offer to grieving women? Could be mothers or partners or sisters, a variety of relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ties in with what we were just talking about in terms of shifts that happen in our identity and our ways of living in the world. So initiation really, it's a process of shedding. It is actually almost preparing for a death on some level, a death of a way of being in the world or an identity that we've got. And in that shedding and in that death process, then we're also then birthing something new. And initiation is a way of connecting more with our power in that, and reclaiming perhaps parts of ourselves that have been a bit dormant. It absolutely can be an ordeal, because there is a sacrifice there. We are looking for change, and change occurs by accepting something new. And often when we adapt a new way of being, then we need to let go of an old way of being. So this is the part of initiation. It's often done in community. Community is so powerful for supporting us. Being a member of a group of women who are going through a similar process, although very individual, witnessing their journey and having your journey witnessed, celebrating that. It's a very important part of that journey. And it absolutely has a place for us when we're ready to shift into a new way of being, to let go of some part of ourselves so that we can live more fully in a different way. And it's initiation, particularly done in a shamanic context, is full of ritual. It is full of symbolism. And it can be a difficult, but in that difficult path, a highly rewarding and transformative process.
That sounds amazing, and I would love to learn more about that. So, Eliza-Beth, thanks very much for joining me today and creating this podcast for suicide bereaved people and for practitioners who work with suicide bereaved people. How would practitioners interested in working in this way find training and professional development? Do you have any ideas?
Yes. So really, we're looking at cultivating a relationship with our soul world and our spirit world. And one of the wonderful ways of doing that is finding the time and the space to connect really deeply with ourselves and then with the natural world and with others. My advice would be to find times to spend outside in the outdoors on your own, in contemplation, finding awe. The natural world has an amazing way of holding us and of showing us deeper aspects of ourselves. It's an integral part of the training. If you're interested in soul work and ritual work, Bill Plotkin has a wonderful book called Soulcraft, and it's full of ideas that can be adopted. Find ways of starting to introduce ritual and a more mindful way of being into your life, just in really small increments. Look at where in the community you might be able to participate in a ritual. And also, I would say a lot of communities now have labyrinths, and you can Google a labyrinth network. It's actually a really powerful tool for starting to experience different ways of being. So mindfully walking a labyrinth can help facilitate connecting deeply within, because it's not like a maze where we're using our cognitive heads to work out where to go. There's a path to follow, and it takes you in and then it takes you back out. And so starting to do these sorts of things. And a number of states also have sweat lodges that you could participate in. So there's a number of different ways. There are numerous books on shamanic practice that you could start to sort of read up on, and shamanic practitioners that you could experience, and then just see what sparks your interest, where you're pulled.
Great. Okay, so that is really a wonderful description of resources. And I know myself, I've walked a labyrinth in Adelaide in an arboretum just before the first anniversary of my loss, and it was a very powerful meditative thing to do, and there was real insight that came to me in the centre of the labyrinth that I've never let go of or forgotten. So yeah, they are amazing rituals to do in a mindful way. And walking is often so useful when you're grieving, you know, because you're moving your body in relation to the world around you. And I think that's a very healing thing to do just on its own, is walking every day. Yeah.
Absolutely, Ione. And, you know, I'll just add finally, when you're walking in the outdoors, then for us, you know, we're walking with the Earth Mother and we're walking with Sky Father above us, and we're never alone. even when we may feel it, we know that we're held there.
Yeah. And I know people in our group talk a lot about finding feathers, often white feathers, and understanding their signs from the person they've lost, and butterflies and dragonflies also. You know, people feel that they're very spiritual signs for them that are encouraging them on their daily life. So, yeah, going outside opens up all those possibilities. So,
absolutely.
Thank you, Eliza-Beth. This has been such a wonderful conversation to have, and thank you very much for creating the space for us to have this conversation. And I hope that the people listening to this podcast find something to take away with them today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ione. It's been such an honour. Thank you.
Thank you.